Once again, we are here, me and you, Groundhog Day, talking about bloody ticket prices. So on Monday, the club announced their ticket prices for Manchester United. You've probably seen them. If you haven't, check out our Instagram, check out our Twitter, where there's a screenshot on there. Incredibly, £150 minimum for the Riverside stand. 150 English pounds to sit in the Riverside stand. Most of the Hammersmith end and the Putney end are £77. The kids' tickets are pretty astronomical as well. So are the concessions. It's the same old shit, but Fulham have just always got a knack of, seemingly every 6 months it feels like, Jack, of just pushing the barrier to see how far they can stretch it. They've done it once again. And everyone's pissed off. And it'll probably repeat in another 6 months and we'll be all pissed off again.
Yeah, it does feel like banging heads continuously against the wall on a topic that the club just seem to refuse to listen to anyone about. They will talk about the fact that these games sell out. They will tell about the fact that financially it makes sense from a club perspective. And that all well might be the case. It's not really my argument with them. My argument is that you can see already these tickets going up on sale on tout sites, where we can already see that Fulham fans, kicking back against this as the club announce things and talk about stuff and saying, I can't be going to that, I can't afford it. And we know that the club will continue to sell out these games because Manchester United fans in London and the surrounding areas will see an opportunity to buy tickets and go and see their club play, and it will dilute the atmosphere. Once again, it will ostracize fans, long-term fans who don't have season tickets, who travel down to the cottage numerous times a year, who have memberships, etc., and are being asked to pay an inordinate amount for, let's just say, 2 adults and 2 kids in let's pick H2 as an example. We're talking approximately £300 on match tickets, which is wild, like wild to even think about that. Fulham are thinking that that's an acceptable amount to charge for a family. This has prided itself on being a family club for so long. And I don't want to go back through all of the things we've discussed time and time again on this podcast about the fact that, alienating young fans is going to drive them away. There are other options. There are other options in the surrounding area. There are options at Chelsea, which will almost certainly be cheaper than this. On the same weekend, there will be options at Brentford, which will definitely be cheaper than this. For a match day experience, they've built a new stadium around and has, all the facilities that you could possibly want. It's a good stadium. As much as it hurts me to say it, they've built a good little stadium there, and it's an enjoyable experience in terms of watching games because it has been built to specifics. You compare that with something like the back of the Hammersmith end, which still, yes, they've put in a few new staircases this summer to try and allay the crushing, but still feels like a war zone when the Hammersmith end is sold out at half-time and before game and after the game in the concourse. They're asking for tickets, north of £160 in the Riverside for an unfinished facility, which continues to have wood chip facilities below it, and seems to, if it was a completely and utterly finished, experience, I'd still think this was too much money. But at that level, you're expecting premium. You're expecting Tottenham's stadium, and instead you're getting chipboard and temporary food and drink underneath. It's nuts. It's absolutely crazy. And in terms of the long-term sustainability of this fan base, it makes no sense whatsoever. It is very much picking up that quick buck and then not coming back on it for the generations to come. Now, if these rumours that the Khans are looking to sell the club at some point, once the Riverside is finished, are true, then maybe they're trying to recoup some of the money that's been floated into the club. And, to deny that has happened is nonsense. They have been put a lot of money, or Shahid Khan's put a lot of money into the club to buy off the debt, to convert that into shares, etc., etc., etc. But when you're looking at what this means for the club long term, and you look at the attendance at Norwich last night, and the core fan base will be there thick and thin no matter what, this is not helping to grow that. And it really upsets me that no one is looking at a long-term strategy or vision here, or they are and they're completely ignoring it and thinking that the long-term strategy is to make the Cottage into somewhere that people, are happy to come as away fans and sit in the home ends, or, tourists come in and sit in and enjoy a game of football, and that's all it is, because they're not then beholden to those people as stakeholders with emotional shares in the club. Maybe that's it. But for me, that's not what the club is about. It's not what any football club should be about. And I think that we're walking perilously further down a really quite dangerous path here.
Yeah, and I saw a couple of people last night use the low attendance as like, well, look, Fulham fans, it was cheap and they still didn't turn up. I look at it the opposite way. It just shows the size of the actual core fan base of this club, and it's still pretty small. It's got bigger. Spurs in a couple of weeks. It's the London derby. It hasn't sold out yet. I think it will just. It's gone to members. Might even go to general sale. This is Spurs away. It's a 3,000 allocation. Most clubs in London would... Oh, well, you can probably go to booking history. You know what I mean? Maybe, kind of. Yeah. Basically, any Fulham fan that's ever bought a ticket can go to probably get a ticket to Spurs away. Spurs away. I know, second or third time there. Like, this is not me ratting out fans that can't go, etc. It's me saying that our core fan base is not that big. We don't sell out away allocations. We don't sell out cup games. That lot up the road, the blue side, has more fans than they know what to do with. They could alienate all the fans that are going to Stamford Bridge and have another 40,000 just roll in and replace them probably tomorrow, because there are that many of them. We don't have that, and this structure is not helping that. But as you say, Jack, I think that either they are ignorant to that and it's just short-term targets, or there is the slightly more cynical side of actually this is a strategy. This is just why bother with long-term supporters and all in the traditional sense when you could just charge high prices and make big money off those kind of prestige Premier League games. But how far do you want to go with this? Might as well, do we just accept it, and then in a couple of years time actually we have an open neutral stand, the whole of the Riverside's just neutral, and it's just support whatever you want as long as you're willing to pay £200 and you get a premium experience, you'll get Premier League football. You could go that far if you wanted to be cynical about it, and you start to wonder now, is that the way it's going? Because it's actually borderline. I just can't believe they've, again, similar to arguments a few years ago, I think the Fulham fan base was kind of had almost loosely accepted these prices, and then they've just gone and absolutely knocked it out of the park again and raised the whole issue once again.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it? It's wild. Look, the Cottage last night was at about half capacity, 12,831. It's been around the 24, just shy of the 25,000 mark for the two home games this season in the league. It was 21,000 for the Tottenham game, but a lot of that would have been the fact that Tottenham took the entire Putney end and also its Premier League opposition. There were more fans at Brentford Arsenal last night in the Carabao Cup than there were at Fulham. Now, again, big team in the Cup, home game, playing a team above you as opposed to one below you raises interest, raises expectation, raises desire to go, all of those things. But it's worth considering, I think. And you look at the way that this has played out so far, it worries me. It worries me majorly. And I think that, when you're trying to compare these things, you have to put Fulham up against our direct rivals. And I don't mean that in terms of local rivals, etc. I mean in terms of who is pulling in their undecided fans or young fans in the area who are growing up around the place. And ultimately, at the moment, there is going to be an issue in, trying to make that stick, because right now, I think, and you mentioned this in your Twitter thread about it, we are reaping the rewards as a fan base, and we have a lot of fan base in the 20s and 30s who were able to go to maybe more games than originally expected, many of whom will, I'm not speaking from experience here. My granddad was a Fulham fan, my dad's a Fulham fan. I come from that line. I was always going to be a Fulham fan. But there are a lot of people, and we see them on social media, and this isn't supposed to be any sort of superiority complex. Everyone is equal. It's an equal share, right? But when you see fans coming in from those £1 tickets that were available, from people being like, oh yeah, I brought a mate along when I was younger, and because tickets were cheap, and now they come to every game. Now they're a season ticket holder. It helped to grow an age and a generation of Fulham fans who are now steeped within the club. What's going to happen in 10 years? Because that generation will not exist, and it's going to skip one. And that is a real worry for what goes on in 10, 15 years times in these away ends, when you're meant to be seeing a new generation come through. You're meant to be seeing an explosion of youth into those ends and make them lively and vibrant. And instead, it's not there. That there is a gaping hole, and suddenly everything starts to fall away again. If Fulham were to be relegated again and go through a tough period that wasn't even just the bounce back years, because actually being in the Premier League and then getting promoted again in the Championship, it's kind of fine because you win loads of games and people get excited about it, and therefore the desire to return continues. But what happens if Fulham go through a period like after our first relegation for the Premier League, where we struggled at the bottom of the Championship? Where are those people going to be then? Are these tourists going to be in here paying £100 for a seat if Fulham are playing Millwall at the bottom of the Championship? I don't think so. And so therefore, can you build that out as a strategy and genuinely think it's sustainable? Look, when the Riverside ticket prices were announced, I said that if they're going to try and charge, to high heaven for those premium seats in the middle of the Riverside, then as long as that subsidises the rest of the ground and everyone else is unaffected, then that's fine. It's not great, but I can live with it. And instead, what we've had is Riversiders moved out of their original seats, who were, given the opportunity to move back, but at 4 times the cost, who are now sitting in the Putney end, sitting in the Hammersmith end, sitting in the Johnny Haynes, who wanted to return to their original seats and were basically forced out by expanding costs. We're seeing all of these things come home to roost. And ultimately, it doesn't feel like the club cares a jot. And every answer comes back to, oh, it's a financial decision. That's not cutting the mustard for me anymore.